If you had walked into the cold stones of a Scottish castle in the year 1306, you might have met a man both crowned and hunted, a king without a kingdom, a ruler with no secure throne, a fugitive wearing a circlet of gold. His name was Robert the Bruce, known to history as Robert the Bruce, and before he became Scotland's liberator, he became its most desperate outlaw. History, you see, is rarely kind to kings who hesitate, and Robert the Bruce hesitated, but once he chose his path, he did not turn back. To understand Bruce, we must begin with Scotland in confusion. In 1286, King Alexander III died unexpectedly. His heir, the young Margaret, Maid of Norway, died soon after. Scotland was left without a clear monarch. The Scottish nobles, anxious to avoid civil war, invited England's formidable king, Edward I of England, to arbitrate the succession. Edward agreed, but he did not come merely as a referee, he came as an overlord, in what became known as the Great Cause. Edward chose John Balliol as the King of Scots, only after extracting acknowledgement of English supremacy. Scotland, proud and prickly, did not take kindly to being treated as a vassal state, and resistance began to simmer. In 1296, Edward I, known as Longshanks, invaded Scotland outright, deposed Balliol, and carried the Stone of Destiny to Westminster. English garrisons occupied Scottish strongholds, and into this tightening grip stepped another figure, William Wallace. Wallace's rebellion marked most famously by the Scottish victory at Stirling Bridge in 1297. Lit a flame across the land. But flames, though bright, can be extinguished. Wallace was defeated at Falkirk in 1298, and later captured and executed in London in 1305. By then, Robert Bruce had already begun calculating his move. Bruce was no minor noble. He came from one of Scotland's most powerful families and possessed his own claim to the throne, but he had at times sworn fealty to Edward I, as had many Scottish nobles navigating a perilous political landscape. Then came the decisive moment. In February 1306, Bruce met his rival John Comyn, another claimant to the throne, at Greyfriars Church in Dumfries. The argument ended in violence. Bruce stabbed Comyn before the altar. Whether premeditated or impulsive, the act was irrevocable. Within weeks, Bruce was crowned King of the Scots at Scone, but he was excommunicated, and Edward I declared him a traitor. Thus began Bruce's reign, in blood, in defiance, and under a sentence of death. The early months were disastrous. English forces crushed Bruce's supporters. His family members were captured, his brothers executed, his wife and daughter imprisoned. Bruce himself fled. Legend tells us that during this period of exile, perhaps in a cave on Rathlin Island, Bruce watched a spider persistently attempt to spin its web, failing again and again until it succeeded. The story, though likely apocryphal, has endured because it captures a truth about the man. He did not quit. By 1307, Edward I was dead. A turning of the tide, his son, Edward II of England, lacked his father's iron will. Bruce began a new campaign, one of patience and precision. Rather than seeking grand confrontations, Bruce waged guerrilla warfare. He avoided pitched battles when possible. He destroyed castles rather than holding them, denying the English strongholds to retake. Gradually and methodically, he regained territory, and Scottish morale rose. English control weakened. Bruce proved himself not merely bold, but tactically astute. By 1314, he controlled much of Scotland. Only one dramatic test remained: the field. In June 1314, English forces under Edward II marched north to relieve the besieged Stirling Castle. The armies met near Stirling, at a place called Bannockburn. Bruce's army was smaller, perhaps 6,000 to 7,000 men, compared to the English force, which may have numbered over 15,000. But Bruce chose his ground wisely. Marshy terrain limited English cavalry. Scottish infantry formed schiltrons, dense spear formations capable of repelling mounted knights. On the eve of battle, according to chroniclers, an English knight named Henry de Bohun charged at Bruce. The Scottish king, mounted and lightly armored, sidestepped the attack and struck Bohun down with an axe. splitting his helmet. It was reckless, it was theatrical, and it was unforgettable. The next day, June 24th, 1314, the Scots won a decisive victory. The English army collapsed into retreat. Bannockburn did not end the war, but it transformed it. Scotland was no longer a rebellion. It was a resurgent kingdom. Independence, however, required recognition. In 1320, Scottish nobles sent a letter to Pope John XXII, now known as the Declaration of Arbroath. It remains one of the most remarkable political documents of the medieval ages. It declared that Scotland had long been free and would remain so. It asserted that kings rule by the consent of the people, and that if Bruce failed to defend their freedom, they would replace him. The famous line echoes across centuries: "For so long as but 100 of us remain alive, never will we on any conditions be brought under English rule." Here was a bold articulation of national self-determination, centuries before such language became common. In 1328, after years of continued conflict and political pressure, England finally recognized Scottish independence in the Treaty of Edinburgh and Northampton. Robert the Bruce's kingship was acknowledged. Scotland stood sovereign. Bruce did not enjoy long years of peace. He died in 1329, likely of illness, at the age of 54. He asked that his heart be removed and taken on crusade to the Holy Land. Though it went only as far as Spain before being returned to Scotland, his body was buried at Dunfermline Abbey. His heart was interred at Melrose Abbey. Even in death, he was divided between piety and patriotism. Robert the Bruce was no flawless knight of romance. He was pragmatic, at times ruthless, capable of shifting allegiance when survival demanded. Yet once committed to Scotland's cause, he pursued it with relentless resolve. His achievement was not merely victory, it was endurance. He inherited a fractured realm and left it recognized as a nation. Scotland's fight for freedom did not end with Bruce. Borders would burn again. Crowns would unite in 1603. Parliaments would merge in 1707. But Bruce's struggle at Bannockburn became a touchstone, a memory summoned whenever Scotland contemplated its sovereignty. He embodied something distinctly Scottish: stubbornness sharpened into strategy, defeat transmuted into determination. Imagine that hunted king in 1306, crown fresh upon his head, enemies closing in, allies scattered. It would have been easy to surrender, easy to negotiate, easy to bend the knee. Instead, Robert the Bruce chose the long road, the uncertain road, the road that required years of hardship before triumph. History does not often reward the impatient, but it sometimes honors the persistent. And on a windswept field near Stirling, amid mud and steel and the roar of men who would not yield, Scotland found its footing. Not because the king was perfect, but because he refused to quit. If you enjoyed this journey into medieval Scotland, consider subscribing for more historical narratives where kings bleed, nations rise, and history proves once again that freedom is rarely given and never cheaply kept.